Hi everyone! In this episode, we'll make a tour of Unitouch Studio's basic composition tools. The editing tools are made to manipulate samples. With them, you can perform 3 different actions on samples: crop, stretch, and loop. And then we'll take a closer look to each of these tools. Crop. To crop a sample, place your cursor over the top left or top right edge of the sample. Your cursor should now be displayed as a bracket. And simply click and then drag on the desired position where you want the beginning or end of your sample to be. Stretch. Stretching can be performed by holding Shift and then dragging the left or right end of the sample. Note that this tool can only be used to modify the tactile content of your sample. For example, this is a very useful feature when you want to sharpen a signal, or on the contrary, make it more round and heavy. Loop. To loop a sample, hold Ctrl for Windows or Command for Mac and click and drag on the right end of the sample. You can make as many repetitions as you want. You can also combine looping with stretch and crop if you like, and you can use any other editing function before or after looping your sample. Keep in mind that looping is always the last action in the editing hierarchy. So this means that you can't crop a signal repetition, but instead every repetition will be edited. Infinite loop. In certain cases, you will need to make one or more samples loop indefinitely. This is the case when you want to create sensations for an action that doesn't have a predetermined length, such as states. To infinite loop a sample, right-click on it and select Loop Sample, or use the shortcut Command+L on Mac, or Ctrl+L on Windows. And you can deactivate it the same way. Now let's move on to the automation tools. Right now you can automate 2 parameters, volume and spatialization. Both of them have their own way of being edited. Volume is automated through envelopes, and spatialization is automated through keyframes. Volume envelopes. To automate the volume of a clip, simply put your cursor above a sample and double-click on its waveform. A new point should appear. By dragging this point, you can set the volume at a given point in the timeline. Creating multiple points allows you to go from one value to another. This is very useful to make intensity changes in your composition. When you need to delete a point, hold Alt and click on this point, or simply click over the point and then press Delete. You can also move multiple points at once by holding the left button on your mouse and making a selection rectangle around these points. Then you can just drag them all somewhere else on the timeline. You can delete multiple points at once by pressing Delete after you have selected them. Specialization keyframes. Specialization in Unitouch Studio is made through keyframes. Each keyframe allows you to modify which actuators are involved in a given intensity at the keyframe position on the timeline. When you play your sensation, Unitouch Studio smooths out the actuator's value between each keyframe, recreating a sense of movement. Keyframes are attached to only one sample at a time. When you add a new sample on the timeline, it always has one keyframe in the beginning that plays the sensation everywhere on the vest. To add a new keyframe, position the playhead at the right time, select your sample, and click on the keyframe icon. This keyframe can now be edited on the Specialization workspace. First, we will set all the actuators' volume to 0 by clicking on the Remove Intensity from All button. The Apply Intensity to All Actuator button on the left does just the opposite and makes every actuator play. The Random Intensities button randomizes the amplitude of each actuator. To edit the actuators boxes one by one, you can just click and drag across them. The amplitude used is the one set by the slider above. You can also use the mouse wheel for this purpose. You can also set the brush size with this slider. Once you have correctly set your keyframe, select your clip and play the effect. You will see the smoothing between keyframes being applied by the software. Now that you know everything there is about editing and automating, we will go briefly through the questions we have to answer before we can move on to a practice example. To receive more information on tutorials and haptics, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell below.